Andy Burnham's expected to speak later in some form about his devolution plans that we were hearing about earlier. More fiscal powers for regional mayors. With us now is Oliver Wright, policy editor of The Times. Good morning, Ollie.
Morning.
What are we expecting here? It's not going to be a speech. Chatting to journalists. They'll have lots of questions.
Yeah, he's got an event in Sheffield today. I would expect that he will make some remarks. He's also going to talk to journalists about his plans. This is the sort of, you heard a lot about this from Andy Burnham. Devolution is his big idea, obviously, former mayor of Greater Manchester. This is about allowing local authorities, strategic authorities, sort of mayors, to hold more of the business rates that are generated in their area and to hold more for the first time of income tax that is generated in their areas. The point being to end, as Burnham would put it, the begging bowl culture of Whitehall, where local authority leaders have to go to Whitehall for everything that they want to do. This way, they'll get handed a chunk of money and they can decide how to spend it without getting the permission from London.
And actually, London, what I saw in the press release, is that they would have to justify why, at Whitehall, those ministers, why they were retaining power and not then giving it to regional mayors. So they really want to sort of shift the balance completely the other way. Yeah,
that's exactly right. Burnham points out with some justification that the UK is the most centralised country really anywhere in Europe in terms of power. And he believes that if you give local regions more power, then that will allow them to boost growth because they know what's needed in their regions. Now, critics would say, up to a point, some regions will do that really effectively, but there'll be other areas of the country that perhaps don't have that kind of leadership, that don't have those kind of skills, that it actually could be some of those areas could go backwards.
Yeah, is there also a chance, Ollie, that we could get some sort of gimmicky policy ideas put forward?
Or just different policy ideas that central government doesn't like. I mean, listeners will be well aware of the sort of frictions between, London and the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh, the Welsh Senate in Cardiff, and you're going to see that writ large across the country. Already we've had Conservative and Reform mayors saying, "Oh, well, if we've got this money, we're going to hand it back to voters. We're going to give it to them in rebates." Now, you had Louise Hay on this morning who said, "Well, no, they can't really do that." Well, I mean, they think they can, and it's going to be, that's just an early example of the type of tensions, I think, that you're going to see through this policy.
Because it's either devolved power and devolved authority or it isn't.
Yeah, quite.
Otherwise, it's going to be sort of caveated to say, it could be just transport or, boosting skills for older people or housing, which are some of the key things they've talked about already. Yeah,
I mean, it's hard to say, we want to, to allow you to devolve power that Westminster shouldn't hoard it. If you then turn around and say, "Oh, well, yeah, but we don't quite like the way you're spending it, so you better not spend it that way." I think it's really intriguing.
How long is it going to take to work, Ollie? Because what Louise Hay did say earlier is that there's no new money available. So you're getting the income tax, you're getting a proportion of the income tax. We don't know what proportion yet. But that will be in replacement of the government grants you would have got otherwise. So it's going to take a while for those areas, even those wealthier areas, let's say Greater Manchester or Bristol, for example, to see to boost their income based on the growth hopefully they'll generate with it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the government still it's still fairly sort of vague plans at this stage. Government are promising that they'll bring forward a white paper at the time of the budget that will set out exactly how much money they're going to get, when they'll get it, and what, if any, are the rules around how they can spend it. But you're right, this isn't going to be an immediate thing. And I think the critical thing is this is all about incentives for them to grow their tax base. If you are the new mayor of Greater Manchester, when that election gets counted today, you don't really have any incentive to bring in businesses into your area to make people wealthier, because the money all goes to Whitehall. The idea now is that you will have a direct incentive to grow your own economy, and I think that will be a sort of a powerful lever for mayors to sort of think, actually, if I did this, I can grow my economy and the region itself can benefit. Time will tell whether that's correct or not.
Ollie, thank you for your analysis. Oli Wright is the policy editor for The Times. Thank you so much.
Politics and The Times Politics newsletter editor Stefan Boscia. Morning, Stefan. Morning, Calum.
Shall we start with Andy Burnham's next announcement for the week, which is on devolution of powers to mayors? This was on the front page of the Times yesterday. So I suppose, what more do we know about the detail of what his devolution plan actually will look like?
Well, look, I mean, I think we're going to get more details today, hopefully, and over the next few months. But I think the key thing is that, income tax and business rates to some degree will be devolved to mayors. And I think some of the important detail we'll have to get is what happens to those areas which don't have mayors. Now, Number 10 has said that there will be a strategic authority set up to try to make sure that those areas do get revenues that are raised in those areas for income tax and business rates. But I think that this shouldn't really come as a massive surprise as policy, because this is something that Metro mayors, particularly Sadiq Khan, particularly Andy Burnham, have been pushing for years now, ever since I started reporting politics in this country. They've said, and they've led the charge to say that income tax and business rates that are raised in London or Manchester, for example, or a larger proportion of them, should be able to be controlled by mayors in those areas, and they should be able to do what they want with them.
Yeah.
And this is what we're going to get today from Andy Burnham.
Yeah, I think your point on areas that don't have mayors is well made. Half the people in England live in areas without regional mayors, and so how will this work? I note that an MP for Cornwall's been speaking out about it being by the way, a Labour MP for an area in Cornwall, saying it's discriminatory and it will increase resentment towards Westminster. And so there is definite tension in these plans.
Yeah, Perrin Moon said that. Great name here, Perrin Moon. He's complaining about it. He's someone from the West Country who's really trying to push on this and try to ask some searching questions.
Although it should be said, shouldn't it, that Cornwall is actually one of 5 areas that already have business rates devolved to them, and that's something that the mayors are going to get. So in that way, there is it is actually equal.
Yeah, I know. That's absolutely the case, and I think that what I think that we should probably wait for some actual detail, because I assume that they've worked through. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt here. I've assumed they've thought through this. They've said that they understand that areas that don't have mayors will also need a benefit. There'll have to be a workaround so it isn't a two-track system, because if it was, it would be clearly such a ridiculous oversight, a ridiculous error, and you would have a sort of two-track system, and it would really sharpen the attack lines about Andy Burnham, that he only really cares about Manchester and other metro cities. Yeah.
Okay. So devolution coming from Andy Burnham today. Right. Should we talk about Diane Abbott and Joni Reid, who are now Labour MPs again?
They are. So obviously people will look at this and think Andy Burnham has stepped in. He said that these two MPs were suspended, can come back in. Diane Abbott was suspended after, it goes back to 2023 when she wrote this obscene article or obscene letter to the editor in The Observer. She said that anti-Semitism isn't racism, it's prejudice. It's a form of prejudice on par with prejudice towards travellers. She was suspended for that. She ended up getting back in the party after a lot of wrangling. She was suspended once again last year after she actually said she never apologised for that. She was right in the first place. And then Joni Reid was suspended because her husband was arrested last year, or earlier this year, on suspicion of espionage, and she was looked at to see if there was any problems. She's always been cleared. Both these cases, you would assume, are because Burnham is in the leadership now, but the party is saying this is only because a disciplinary process is concluded and found that they should be let in the party. But I sort of think that no one's really going to buy that, and this will probably be a part of a sort of clean slate operation from Burnham to say that he wants MPs to have another chance. He wants MPs to unify around him, and the party discipline won't be quite as sharp as it was under Keir Starmer.
Yeah. And Kemi Badenoch's been writing in The Telegraph today on, I suppose, what could become a bit of a point of contention for the Conservatives on net zero versus climate change. Net zero scepticism, says Kemi Badenoch, is too often confused with climate change scepticism, but they are not the same thing. It's an elementary distinction, but an important one. Climate change is a scientific phenomenon. Net zero by 2050 is a political programme. I just find it interesting that she's having to kind of try to clarify where the Conservatives actually stand on climate change, because it's been sort of bundled into this culture war issue that net zero's become.
Yeah, it's a fairly difficult line to land, because she's gone quite hard on net zero the last year or so. She's said that Tory MPs or Tory members who want to become MPs can't disagree with her stance on this and can't be supportive of net zero by 2050 and run for the party. So it's something she's gone really strong on. But she's turned around now and said, she's not a climate change denier. She believes climate change is real, but she just believes that the UK shouldn't have to go to net zero by 2050. And I think this is an argument which has been made by people on both sides of the aisle. Tony Blair made it reasonably well recently, and it is that the UK has commitments to bring down its emissions, but it already has brought down emissions by a huge amount, and one of the leading European countries for carbon emission reductions. And that if you compare that to countries in the developing world or China or America, it's a tiny fraction, and to hamper our economy for the next 25 years to do this would be a form of suicide. So I think that is basically Kemi Badenoch's argument. But I think, if you want to look at it broader geopolitical terms, I think it's quite a difficult thing to sell, because if you were going to go to these countries in the third world or in the developing world and say that we want you to bring down your emissions, you can't really say that unless you're doing it yourself. And I think that's, if she was Prime Minister, the problem she would find. But clearly this isn't for those practices. This is for a domestic audience. And she clearly believes that the high price of energy at the moment means that attacking net zero is fertile ground for her. Let's see if she's right.
Good to speak to you this morning, Stefan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's Stefan Boscia, who is the Times Politics newsletter editor, and you can read his newsletter if you're subscribed to it. It will be emailed to you at around 9 o'clock this morning. You can access it through your account at thetimes.com.